Welcome to the Dr. Carolyn Coker Ross Show, awakening your full potential and expanding your understanding of how to live fully and joyfully by making conscious choices that promote and maintain vitality in all areas of your life. Now here's your host, Dr. Carolyn Coker Ross. Please be sure to listen to this episode in an environment that is safe. Do not listen to this recording while driving a car or operating any kind of machinery.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Dr. Carolyn Coker Ross podcast. I have a special guest today, Dr. Rebecca Williams. She is an award-winning author and a leader in the field of wellness and recovery from mental illness and addiction. She received a master's degree in counseling and counseling psychology from Harvard University and completed a PhD specializing in clinical psychology from the University of California, Santa Barbara. Rebecca has a co-writer, and their newest book is called The Gift of Recovery, 52 Mindful Ways to Live Joyfully Beyond Addiction. And welcome to the podcast, Rebecca.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
You don't mind if we go on a first-name basis?
That's perfect.
Awesome. Well, you and I are in the same field, and I'm assuming you're in San Diego as well, right?
Actually, Carolyn, I just moved to Savannah, Georgia.
Oh my, okay.
Yes, I was in San Diego for 23 years and worked in a variety of settings in the VA hospital and other settings, private practice. And I just 3 months ago up and moved to Savannah, Georgia.
My goodness, that's a big move. Wow. Well, let's start by talking about how you got interested in using mindfulness in treating addictions.
Sure. I grew up in New York City and was surrounded by a lot of family members and other community people who were either addicted to drugs or alcohol or had a mental health challenge or both. And I always in the back of my mind, I wanted to kind of move my way into psychology. And luckily I was able to do that. But along the way, I realized psychology is a tough profession. And I started practicing yoga about 32 years ago. And the combination of yoga, meditation, as well as psychology helped guide me in my direction of trying to understand better how to get well from mental health challenges and also from addiction.
Yeah, I don't think most people would necessarily think of mindfulness if somebody has a mental illness like schizophrenia or something like that. So can you say a little bit more about how that works and how you apply mindful techniques in someone who may be, seriously mentally ill?
Yeah, first, let me just read a really good definition of mindfulness because I think people get scared about it and confused. And so this is the one I like the best. There's a ton out there. Everybody probably has heard of it. And people maybe have put a toe in the water of mindfulness and meditation. But here's what I like. Sylvia Boorstein, she's a Zen practitioner. She says that mindfulness is the aware, balanced acceptance of the present experience. It's not more complicated than that. She says it is opening to receiving the present moment, pleasant or unpleasant, just as it is, without clinging to it or rejecting it. And I like that one because it really just says, don't be afraid. It's not that complicated. Just ease into your emotions and try not to cling to them or reject them.
So, for example, if someone has schizophrenia and they're hearing voices or, seeing things or having hallucinations, how would you apply mindful technique?
Yeah, that's a great question. And at the hospital, there was quite a few different mindfulness classes going on, along with dialectical behavioral therapy classes going on to help with the extreme emotions. But even in schizophrenia or depression or anxiety or any mental illness, it helps to calm the mind down by just breathing, taking a moment, being in the room with another person or a group or a therapist, and realizing that there's safety when you can calm down and you can start focusing on your breath.
And people are able to do that on that basic level.
It's a start. There's obviously other treatments that may be in conjunction, especially with schizophrenia. That's a tough one, or if you have a dual diagnosis. But certainly anyone and everyone can really benefit from re-engaging with themselves. Yeah. I always think of psychosis and depression and anxiety as helpful tools and not something to completely run away from, just to kind of make peace. And I think I love your work on compassion and mindful eating, and it's kind of in that same vein of just being kinder to yourself.
Yeah, I've worked in a number of treatment centers where I've worked with addictions and eating disorders. And I know nowadays mindfulness is a big kind of buzzword and everybody's talking about mindful treatment and blah, blah. But like you said, many people overcomplicate it or confuse it, or they just bring in yoga and they think, okay, well, we have yoga. So, obviously yoga is helpful, but it's not the entire story of mindfulness. And it's not, kind of the fuller version of mindfulness. So when we talk about addictions, what is the role that you see mindfulness plays in treating addictions?
Yes, and you do great work with addictions also. The idea, the way I look at it, is addictions, even if it's a behavioral addiction like gambling, over-shopping, overworking, any of the behavioral or substance abuse addictions, it's really a way to numb feelings, and mindfulness is the opposite of that. So addiction will kind of come down on you and numb all those intense feelings of anger, rage, frustration. And mindfulness is saying, hey, let's just have the feeling, not fight it, let it move through like a leaf down a stream philosophy, and realize that you're okay, that everything is going to work out okay. So even the triggers and all of the intensity of addiction can still have a piece where mindfulness is kind of holding you a little bit so that you don't overreact or impulsively do a behavior.
So many people with both mental illness and addictions have a history of trauma. And so they're very, many people are afraid of really sitting with their feelings or, feeling fearful of having to go back and sort of remember certain feelings or certain experiences. Is mindfulness help in that arena?
Yeah, and I just listened to your podcast with Dr. Catherine Millard a couple moments ago that I just put up, which was fantastic, talking about shame, guilt, and trauma. And similar to what you guys just talked about, which is a phenomenal podcast to understand shame and guilt. Same thing here. Mindfulness is just really an ability to get back to yourself, to realize you are of value, to be kind to yourself, and to not overreact to even your past. Mindfulness is really about, in yoga and in other things, like the forefinger and the thumb together. So yeah. Exactly, right. That point in the middle is the present moment. So the past.
I never knew that.
Cool, right?
Yeah.
So that's all this is. And so it's just, even if you're in a room and you're feeling overwhelmed, all you need to do is put your thumb and your first finger together and realize that, hey, that point where it meets is the present moment. Let me just get back to the present moment. And
that's a really cool tool. Now, in your book, which I think it's a companion volume to the first book, the Mindfulness Workbook for Addiction, is that correct?
That's correct. It's a companion. It's like a pocket guide to the Mindfulness Workbook for Addiction.
Okay, you talk about, the title says 52 Mindful Ways to Live Joyfully. So first of all, can you just give us some examples, a few of those 52 ways?
Right. It's so funny. When I was working with the publisher, I really fought the word joyfully, live beyond addiction, because I was like, oh my God, I can't put joyfully in there. That's going to be too intense. People are going to just move the other direction, because when you think of addiction, you don't think joy. So over time, I was able to relax into the actual subtitle of Living Joyfully Beyond Addiction. So there's 52. I have the book right here, but 52 weeks of the year is how we design the book. And within each chapter, and you can pick up any chapter at any time, there's affirmations, and there's 7 affirmations per chapter. So literally every single day, you can give yourself a kind example. I can give you an example.
Sure, give us a few.
Okay, so there's a chapter called When Emotions Get Stuck, which I think is similar to what you talked about with Carolyn Millard, the heavy-duty emotions, the trauma. What do you do with that? How do you heal? And a mindful way to think about getting unstuck from emotions is, here it is. I focus my attention on being mentally, physically, and spiritually well. I focus my attention on being mentally, physically, and spiritually well. So if you start the day with that intention, that affirmation, and you look at it on your phone throughout the day, and maybe in the evening, you remind yourself, my goal today is to be well. it starts to rewire the brain. You talk a lot about that as a doctor and as a scientist, that there's ways to rewire the brain. Affirmations, repetition, habits, again and again, positive habits is a great way to rewire the brain. One of the chapters I love is anger, my favorite. Everyone runs away from anger. I love anger. It's my favorite.
I'm with you. I love anger because there's so much richness in it. And also there's so much benefit when people are able to get in touch with anger and move through it. It's just like a dark cloud clears,
It's fantastic. I really love sitting in a room with someone who's angry. It's my favorite thing. And we have a whole chapter on soothing anger here, chapter 8. It talks about what you just said, to actually figure out that anger is an important tool. And actually, as Harriet Lerner, who wrote...
my favorite author. I still talk about her and refer patients to her book. Dance of Anger, you mean?
Exactly. But that was the catalyst for me to understand and get calm with anger. And she basically said anger is just a boundary that's been crossed. And I like the way she said it. And I do refer people to her books also, the Dance of Anger, the Dance of Intimacy. But the way to think about anger is, has a boundary been crossed for a person, whether it's a spiritual boundary, a physical boundary, an emotional boundary,
a moral boundary.
Exactly.
It's so interesting. I don't think people really, that could be a whole nother book. I don't think people really understand much about boundaries other than it's like, what do you call it? The line in the sand. That's what I wanted to say. And as I've been doing this work for longer and longer, I begin to see that so many boundaries have to do with, your own moral values. And when someone else kind of crosses your moral value, it can cause you to feel betrayed because you may have thought that they were on the same sort of wavelength as you are, or that they had the same values as you are. And I think we're seeing that in our country a lot, where there's a clash of values that's kind of surprising. I think we all think, we're all Americans, so, we should all feel the same way. But, different groups have different values. And when those boundaries are crossed, it can make the other group or the other individual in an intimate relationship feel angry, betrayed, etc.
Exactly. And that is many times the reason people use drugs or drink is the rage and the anger, especially, like you said, what's going on now. So,
and I don't think they always understand why they're angry. That's what I was trying to get to is, you have this reaction and you may not take the time to understand, well, that person may not have actually meant to harm me. They may just have a completely different set of values than I do.
Exactly. And how do you stay well with that information? In other words, how do you maintain wellness and move to a next level of being well? Because resilience is everything. So if you don't feel you're able to recover from being angry and you just kind of push it aside or push it under the rug and, of course, use drugs or alcohol or overeating or whatever it may be, it's a cycle and it's a constant struggle. So we want to teach.
It also leads you to the next place, because if you never resolve this one, then when you get to another place, you still haven't understood what happened, and it just piles betrayal upon betrayal upon betrayal. And how do you deal with that? How do you help your clients deal with that when it's someone within their own family, for example?
Yeah, a lot of it, you're probably seeing this too. A lot of folks hold on to a lot of resentment. And I think someone in your family is doing some bad behavior, you start resenting them, or they didn't show up. Basically, resentment is someone didn't show up. That's the way I look at it. I try to keep everything very simple.
I love that.
Yeah. And so if you're carrying around a lot of resentment, it's heavy. As someone who specializes in eating disorders, as you do, it's physically heavy and it's literally heavy. So part of the journey from where I'm sitting, and I'm in Savannah, I have some slower pace of life now. I can think about these things. The point is forgiveness, self-forgiveness, and forgiveness of the other person. I know that sounds kind of lofty, but that's all we have. So first, forgive yourself for your reactions and how you're feeling about things. It's normal, you're human. And then begin the process of forgiving the other family member, the other friend or person who did not show up for you.
The thing that I find, though, is that I agree. I think forgiveness is the ultimate goal, but often it takes what the Buddhists call radical acceptance, because if someone has different value system than you do, whether they grew up in the same home or not, or even if it's a close friend, that value system is not going to change really. So in some ways, you can't forgive until you can get to the place where you can accept that they're not going to change their value system and you're not going to change your value system. So how do you continue to move forward in relationship when, you're going to rub up against that value difference on a regular basis? It's not going to go away.
Exactly. I feel calm just talking to you right now about this. This is a very powerful topic, but also it's kind of landing me in a very calm place, because there's going to be times when you're not going to be around other people. And there's going to be times when you may need to let go of someone, or you may need to bring someone else into your world of friends and family, because there are times when you need to take breaks. And I think that's a very healthy thing to do, even within a family. Even if you have a child, for example, a teenager who's using, or you have an adult child who's incarcerated, or whatever the situation is.
Or someone who's mentally ill in your family.
Exactly.
And they're acting out from their illness. And I love what you're saying, though, about taking a break. Because, I mean, in my family, we have a fair amount of addictions and, mental illness. When I started working in this field, at some point recently, working with the ACE, the Adverse Childhood Experiences results that are coming out, I did a family tree and realized, oh my God, there's so much trauma in my family, both ancestral trauma and also trauma in people's lifetimes. And looking at the spill out of that being addictions, mental illness, eating disorders, etc. But what I was going to say is when you have someone in your family either with an addiction or with a mental illness, and they are, you may be trying to help them. I remember, when I was younger, my mom would always come to me and say, well, you need to help so-and-so. You're trying to help them. And that starts to disrupt your life because, obviously they're addiction. So they're sick or they're mentally ill and they're sick, but it can affect your life to a great degree. So I love the point of, you may get to a place where you have to say, I need to take a break from this. And that's okay.
Mm-hmm. And as you take a break, to refocus on yourself and get well again, because I think everyone goes through ups and downs of being well, whether you're eating right or you're sleeping or exercise. Recommit. You have agreements with yourself and follow through with those agreements that you say, I'm going to go work out, or I'm going to sleep, go to bed early, or whatever it is. Just simple things. And the book talks about how to just do simple things, stop drinking sodas, or, just things to kind of get you well again. And then you can make a decision whether you want to put a toe back in the water of a family member who's got mental illness or addiction. It's
and I think for the person with addiction, often boundaries are very porous, and that they too allow people to come into their lives who harm them while they're in their addiction. I mean, I see a lot of young patients who are in addiction, and they're being taken advantage of too because they're in a vulnerable, state. And so, having boundaries, what we started this part of the conversation by talking about how boundaries are much more complicated than drawing a line in the sand, And so I think this is important from the person with addictions point of view and the family members, and even if you don't have addictions. So
exactly. And I was up against the struggle of overhelping myself with family members who were either mentally ill or had addiction problems. And I had to really look at my own stuff and say, what is going on with you that you're overhelping and you're just throwing everything at it? And so I had to lean back and take care of myself and actually begin underhelping, which actually worked out great. It's tricky because obviously if someone's struggling, the first thing you want to do is throw a blanket of everything on them. But maybe there's a pathway that the person has to go through.
Well, that's really important. There is, what I always say is everybody's life is their own journey.
Right.
They're on their own journey. We don't know why their journey is taking them this way or that way, or into addiction or into mental illness, but it is their journey. And, we can't always take them off their journey because we want to. But I also love the fact that you were able to, because I think this is part of being in the helping professions, that we don't do our own work and we don't stop to ask ourselves, what is it that we're getting out of overhelping?
Exactly.
Everybody, I've worked with so many people who are codependent, and they feel like, well, being kind, being a helper is a good thing. Yes, it is, but it can also be a bad thing if you're not aware of what you're doing and you're overdoing it to your own detriment.
Exactly. Yeah, I know for me, I think I was overhelping, which was kind of an avoidance of dealing with my own things. And so so overhelping is a procrastination in my viewpoint. I just thought about that as I'm talking to you because
there's your simplification. I love it. Oh, so we need to make a list of these. This is your new book.
Exactly.
So procrastination it's just a distraction from dealing with our own stuff. And you will have to deal with it at some point in everybody's life. They have what I call a come to Jesus moment, but where you have to face up to what's going on in your life. But we will do, as humans, it's amazing. We will do the most intricate things to avoid dealing with, situations. It's funny. So is there another part of your book besides the anger chapter that you really, really love?
Well, what got me to this point is that first book, Mindfulness Workbook for Addiction. What I was not finding in the literature when I was working with addictions was the idea of loss. No book, when you go to the back to figure out, what is this author talking about loss? I felt that with addictions, people were not talking about the losses that they were having in their lives or prior losses. And so addiction also created additional losses. So if you started using based on grief, you actually had more losses. You lost your maybe freedom by going to jail or prison. You lost your friends. You lost all sorts of stuff. So I noticed there was an intense cycle of loss, addiction. And so that propelled me to try to continue to add loss, understanding loss and grief into the first book, Mindfulness Workbook for Addiction, and also The Gift of Recovery, Ways to Manage Loss.
That's super important. I mean, you didn't mention, but we also see people with addictions lose friends who they've been using with who die from overdoses. They also lose friends who don't want to be around them in their addiction and family members. But I've seen patients who've been into multiple treatment centers and no one has ever helped them deal with their grief and loss of maybe their best friend who got into drugs with them and died of an overdose, which is, there's guilt and shame and grief and all of that. It's a complicated form of loss. So I think that's very important. Well, let's see a copy of your book, because I know you have it there, The Gift of Recovery, 52 Mindful Ways to Live Joyfully Beyond Addiction. So can people get that at bookstores and on Amazon?
Yes, on Amazon, at bookstores, and I have a website, mindfulnessworkbook.com, where you can kind of look at what's on the inside of the book a little bit. You can even get CEUs for this book and for the other book. If you're a therapist, a practitioner, that you need CEUs. I've dog-eared this book because there's a lot of good stuff in here. All sorts of ways to be well, including decluttering your space and exercise and things that you probably focus a lot on too in your books.
Yeah, and if you're a practitioner, it would be useful for you personally, probably. I'm thinking for me personally, because we struggle with some of the same kinds of things. Different types of addiction, like workaholism or overhelping or, being addicted to stress or chaos, but it's the same thing. Mindfulness is the answer to all of that, being present. Eckhart totally talks about being in the now. It's all there is.
Right, and breathing. I have a little stone on my desk that says breathe. I don't know if you can see it. Yeah, you can. Reminder, just to kind of keep in the moment and breathe through things if you get stuck. Mm-hmm.
That's amazing. Well, it's been so fun having you on, Rebecca. So thank you so much for sharing this really important information.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and we'll put links to your website and to your book on the show as well. So I encourage people to check out her work. Sounds amazing.
Thank you so much.
You have been listening to the Dr. Carolyn Coker Ross Show. Please visit CarolynRossMD.com. That's CarolynRossMD.com to access podcasts, show archives, and more about Dr. Ross and her services.